This is the Mind of the Meanie. Here are your hosts, the Blue Meanie and Adam Barnard.
Peace, world, and welcome everybody to the Mind of the Meanie, your weekly peek into the world, according to former WWE superstar and ECW original, the Blue Meanie. We'll cover wrestling, music, movies, sports, and lots of useless knowledge, all contained in the Mind of the Meanie. I'm your tour guide, Adam Barnard, and he is the Blue Meanie. And Meanie, we know what's on your mind today. The pro wrestling world lost a trailblazer and a pioneer, one of the greatest to ever do it. Sabu passed away earlier this week, and just wanted to give you the floor, man. Just want to give you the floor to talk about your friend and share some memories and talk about him.
Yeah, still processing it, you know. The crazy thing is, you know, I had just finished Sabu's book. You know, I was listening to the audio version on my rides, and I get the message. You know, a message Sabu passed, and of course you have to double check, triple check it, you know, to see if it's true, and start making the rounds, and it just doesn't feel real. But it hurts. It really hurts, bro. And I guess the hardest part of the hardest part, you know, is, you know, not being at home, reading that message, and then I had to call and tell my wife, you know, that Sabu was gone. And I mean, that's just something you just don't text to somebody, you know.
Right.
No, it's one thing, you know, somebody out there, you know, somebody well known passed away. You have no emotional connection or no personal connection to pass away. Like, oh my God, so and so died. But, you know, given my history with Sabu, and, you know, been with my wife for 20 years, and she's, you know, grown to have a bond with him as well.
Yeah.
And I just called her, and she answered the phone, and it's just trying to get those words out of my mouth to, you know, say what would happen. It was probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. It still sounds weird to say. Doesn't feel real. But I've done a few tributes this week, and sometimes it feels like I'm just reminiscing over a friend that's still here. You know, because, you know, we tell war stories all the time. You know, we do podcasts all the time, tell war stories, you know, good, bad stories. All my memories with Sabu have been great. I first met Sabu in '93 as a fan. Dennis Corluzzo was having a convention in Bensalem, Pennsylvania. You know, a show that night called the Bensalem Bash, which featured a cage match with Sabu and Chris Candido. And met Sabu during the day, and super cool. That was October '93, and then less than a year later, I moved to Al Snow's March of '94, and then, you know, I'm a lumberjack in a match with Al Snow and Sabu. I go to run interference, and I'm you know, catching Sabu doing dives.
Now this is the zebra kid, right? This is when,
Oh,
yeah. Oh yeah. The Zuba's in everything, man. I love it. I love it.
God awful. Well, the funny thing is, I wasn't the first zebra kid either, but, you know, when you go and buy gear, you know, like, what looks cool. So we went to, you know, me and Al went to K&H, where That's the company who made pretty much everybody's gear. You know, you went to K&H for your tights and trunks, and you went to B&A boots for your boots. You know, Bill Ash boots. So we go to K&H, you know, because it's like an hour from Lima, and I found these cool zebra pants and zebra tights, which I still have. They fell off my thing.
I was gonna say my thought initially is like I'm picturing you trying the Zuba pants on. You're like, nobody wants a roundhouse kick in the face of these bad boys on, right? Like, ain't nobody want none of this shit.
No,
okay,
no,
not a single.
Meanie, you do this, I do this, and we'll be all right.
Listen, dude. Listen, man. I don't want any trouble. I don't want any trouble.
So I buy them and become the zebra kid, Brian Rollins, and I had, you know, just finding my way. And you know, Sabu would come to Al Snow's gym. You know, Sabu, Al had a tournament at his gym, and Sabu was on there, and you know, that's how I became familiar with Sabu as some officially being, you know, trained to be in the business. And then I have, my first show I was supposed to be on is supposed to be main evented by, Sabu. I'm thinking of something else, but I have my first match, and then Sabu starts running shows, and he starts booking me on his shows. You know, he wanted, you know, to use talent that, you know, a lot of people hadn't seen in the area, and he, you know, booked some of Al's students, myself included, to be on the undercards. From there, you know, he ran under the guys under the banner of the NWA. It was just NWA Michigan, but you know, everybody would joke around, call it NWA Sabu. And people think it was called officially NWA Sabu. It wasn't officially NWA Sabu, but you know, he would do something on his match where, like, just to get the crowd into the crowd, a crowd into the show, he would do a run-in on a match earlier on in the show, maybe have a preliminary match, or just beat somebody up. And there's, you know, a couple times he jumped at me, he beat me up, you know, and you know, to me that was like kind of like a sign of, like, you know, hey, I trust you, kind of thing. So
yeah.
And then, you know, I moved back home, bounce around the indies, see Sabu here and there on the indies, and I go to ECW. And the night I debut as the Blue Meanie is the night they bring Sabu back from being fired. So it's like there's always been these like moments where he was there in my career, you know, whether it's me, you know, meeting him as a fan, me training at Al Snow's gym and him being there, and then him put me on his shows. And then I go to ECW, and my first night in, lights off, you know, lights come back on, Sabu's there. And the funny thing about that is I'm sitting in the front row, and they're bringing me in as the Blue Meanie, and I'm supposed to be Stevie's super fan. And my instruction is to, you know, they said, all right, sit in the front row, but don't sell for anything other than Stevie Richards. Fine. That's my instructions. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm sitting in the crowd just like grumpy cat, you know, because I'm waiting for Stevie. And of course, the second thing they do in the night is bring Sabu back. So if you watch that footage where the lights go off, lights come on, and Sabu's, you know, they're pointing, the whole building is going insane except for one person sitting in the front row, just sitting there like this. You know?
And I'm sure inside you're like, holy shit, this is great.
Oh, inside,
right? Yeah.
It's kinetic, frenetic, whatever kind of energy you want to use. I was losing my shit on the inside, but yeah. So, you know, and then, you know, we worked in ECW together, and somebody just posted a video. I debuted for ECW November 95. November, I remember 95. And then in January, Stevie has a match with Sabu, which I'm involved with, and
Mm.
I'm involved. Somebody just posted clips from that match, and that brought back a whole bunch of memories. So there's been a lot of cool, rare Sabu stuff being posted online, and it brings back so many memories. But the most important thing is, I was fortunate enough to be a young kid getting into the business, and my paths crossing with Sabu, just to be able to, because when you first meet Sabu, his guard's up, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But once he gets familiar with you, he gets used to you, then he opens up. Slowly but surely he opens up. And when I went to ECW, I had a good year and a half of him, experiences with him that, I'd be in the ECW locker room and people see me interacting with Sabu, like not that, with them not knowing that I knew Sabu already and we had this relationship, you know, except for, a few. Like Sabu was booking his NWA shows, and there's one show I was on where he brought in Taz, Dreamer, and Paul E.
Mm.
And so Paul, Taz, and Dreamer already had we're familiar with my relationship with Sabu, but like I would talk to Sabu just like talk to a friend, and people are like, "Wow, what's going on with this new kid in ECW? He's just walking up to Sabu and talking, crack it like we're sitting we had a show in Staten Island, and Sabu's telling a story about Japan, and I forget what it was, but I cracked a one liner, and Sabu pops, and then people are looking at me like this. This kid is just talking to Sabu freely and popping him. And meanwhile, there's people in the locker room who are afraid to even approach Sabu. I was just listening to Busted Open, and Bubba Ray Dudley was talking about how he was scared to death of Sabu. Until he got the chance to work with him, and then things got a little bit more relaxed. But man, and the cruel irony of it is, besides the fact that we lost Sabu, that was bad enough. The Dark Side of the Ring aired on Tuesday for his uncle, the Sheik, which Sabu was featured on and interviewed for, and to hear his voice again, just got me. This whole week's been a huge gut punch. The worst part about finding out, I found out Sunday. I had to tell my wife, but I'm in public.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I need to go somewhere because I'm about to get really emotional. And what? When Eddie Van Halen passed away, another person who I idolized, passed away. I was in public, and I was. My wife called me to tell me about it, like, because she's like, oh, I'm sure he hasn't heard about it yet, so she called to tell me, and I had to go find a place to get it like emotional, just cry, So I find out about Sabu, and then I gotta just find a place to get emotional, because I ugly cry, just and it's funny because I always it's funny I bring up Eddie Van Halen because to me, Sabu was the Eddie Van Halen of wrestlers. They both were dedicated to their craft, both second generation. Even though, Sabu, the Sheik was his uncle, I'm still saying he's second generation. I don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, Sabu loved Sheik like his father, and Sheik raised him like he was his own kid.
Yeah, that counts. As far as I'm concerned, that counts. Yeah.
Both second generation, both changed the way people look at wrestling and approach wrestling and move sequences, and both were humble, just they were uncomfortable with the praise you heaped on them, and they both carried that with them. So a lot, to me, Sabu reminds me a lot of Eddie Van Halen and the way he changed professional wrestling. Look at everything that people are doing in wrestling today, and if you, the crying shame is if you could trademark move sequences, Sabu would have been a billionaire.
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing is, that's another thing. Sabu, you know, if you were ever a young aspiring wrestler on a show, or if you were in his crew, or it didn't matter. If he saw, somebody was in need, he would go out of his way to help that person. He would give you the shirt off his back if you needed it. Plenty of times, he'd be on shows with guys, and if somebody didn't get paid, he'd reach into his own pay and pay them.
Wow.
Go to a restaurant, he'd sneak off, get the bill, pay it, before anybody else can get a chance to look at it, Most famously, or maybe not so famously, but Sabu was in FMW, and Louis Spicolli was on that tour, and he pulled a rib that unintentionally got Louis fired from FMW. And Sabu was so guilt-ridden about it that he went and got, he tried to get Louis booked in ECW. And Paul was like, I can't afford him. Louis lived in California, and the price of the ticket wasn't, he couldn't afford to fly and pay him. Sabu said, I'll pay for him. So Paul went, excuse me? He's like, I'll pay Louis to wrestle out of my money. And I don't know how long Louis Spicolli was in ECW, but that whole time he was there, he was being paid by Sabu, because Sabu was so guilt-ridden by accidentally getting him fired from FMW. So that's the person Sabu was, but he did everything in secret. And
I thought, I started to chuckle because I was like, oh, wait, he ribbed him. And I thought he was like, oh, telling him that he was going to get canned. I didn't realize he actually got canned. I misunderstood what you said. Yeah.
Well, the story was they're in Japan, and they're taking those bus rides, and they're super long. And, Louis had the bladder of a baby. And
don't we all?
He was getting heat with the boys, asking the bus driver to pull over to the rest stop, take a piss. So he, somebody brought up that he'd just pee in a fucking water bottle or whatever. And it got to the point where one of the officials says, no more peeing in the water bottle. Right. So they pull over at a rest stop. They go in to use the bathroom. Sabu goes and buys like an iced tea or something like that. And when the official comes on, he goes, Louis, shaking the iced tea, saying that it was Louis' piss bottle.
Oh no.
And they fired Louis, thinking that he was still peeing on
the bottle. Oh, jeez.
Fucking Sabu was so guilt-ridden. He had to right the wrong. So
God,
a lot of people didn't know that. A lot of people didn't know, but it was the right thing to do. I had an instance where 2005, I had just gone back to WWE. In one instance, I'm on SmackDown wrestling JBL, and that weekend I was on an indie show in Delaware where there was no fans, and the promoter has a pre-show meeting. He goes, oh well, how the house is light tonight, and that the house was the house is light tonight, and some of you can get paid, some but we'll all pay off the DVD sales. And I'm like, I've heard this before.
Yeah.
And me being a veteran on the show, everybody looks at me. I was like, look, we're here, we traveled here, let's do the show, and if anything, it's a practice. Now, what are you gonna do? Go home and I've done nothing? You just let's just have a show for nobody. in a bar in Delaware. So my opponent, I drove down with. I rode down with the guy who got me booked on the show. I got paid, he didn't. So, we go back to Philly. It's like, let's go get something to eat. And we go to the Oregon Diner and paid for his meal. And then I paid him out of my pay for his match. And that's something I learned from Sabu. Just it wouldn't have been right for me to sit there, have him be paid, and then have dinner with somebody and expect them to pay. No, I made money. You were my opponent. You're the reason why I was able to make this money. Here's a little part of my pay. Here's part of my pay, and put some food in your belly. And that's something I learned from Sabu. Having Sabu help take care of me and knowing how he took care of so many others.
Yeah, I'm just reading a lot of the comments here as we're talking, and thank you for everybody for joining us tonight. We appreciate you spending your Friday night with us here on the show. One of the first memories that I have of Sabu was, I think actually it was around 96, around November to Remember with the Taz feud. That was one of my favorite feuds in wrestling, all through the Monday Night Wars and everything else. I mean, the way they told that story, and obviously Barely Legal 97. I mean, it was just like an unbelievable moment in ECW. And like we've talked about it here before, like ECW is kind of like a secret handshake, and if you knew, you knew, and you were in, right? But everybody was allowed to come in, kind of thing. It was like, hey, we want you all to be here and we want you all to be a part of this. But it was also like not everybody kind of was hip to it. And I just remember being mesmerized by Sabu and just watching some of the shit he did was just, I hadn't seen stuff like that before. I wasn't watching Japanese wrestling. I wasn't watching anything but WWE at the time. And then WCW obviously came into the forefront, but I didn't see the crazy stuff. I didn't see the blood. I didn't see the crazy table jumps or the barbed wire, like you didn't see that. And so then you hear about Sabu and it's like, all right, well, now I love this guy. I want to see this guy on my fucking TV every night. I want to see him every day.
Yeah.
But, man, it's just a shame. It really is. I know that I was out in Vegas for WrestleMania weekend. I missed out on this last show. I really wanted to go, but I missed out on being there. I'm gonna kick myself in the ass for that forever. But all around, man, just from what all the stories and things are saying, just an absolutely wonderful guy. And it's really just a shame. I want to just pull back some of these other comments here. Stana City Network says, I popped for Sabu rocking a Hatchet Man logo in his mid-2000s run in between Juggalo Championship Wrestling. I believe that was post ECW, I think.
Yeah.
Mass Entity is here. Good evening, sir. He says, just a few weeks ago, someone asked me what the best match I ever saw live was. I said Sabu and RVD versus the Eliminators at November to Remember 96. Man, that was a banger. Banger and a half, bro. That was epic. Always a favorite of mine. The boss is here tonight as well. Sabu was, if not one of the biggest reasons ECW got put on the map. He made a lot of careers big. Can't argue with that, sir. Here's a good one from Mass Entity. I was biting my lip because this one made me pop a little bit. The first time I ever heard Sabu speak, this is Mass Entity, was when he landed crotch first on the rail at the ECW arena and yelled, "My ball."
Yeah, I can see that.
Totally check.
My balls
Checks out completely.
Yeah.
Stana City, I want to share that comment, but I can't put that word on the screen. Taz, you fucking little person, get out here. That was a moment there. David Maj says, "Love you, Blue."
I love you guys.
Armchair Leg Drop said, I learned of ECW from a friend in middle school. That's where we all found out about ECW, pal. Who was into tape tradings online. He really felt taboo. Sabu was legendary back then and will be forever. Absolutely. I mean, I don't know if I would say taboo, but I get the thought process of it where it was like like a club, It was like a club that
it's like sneaking into your dad's record collection and listen to the the dirty comedian records,
Yeah. It's like the first time you heard Carlin, right? You're sneaking in and putting those records on. You're like, oh my God. Like
Yeah.
they're literally, I could tell, and I've shared this with you before, man. Like even before we did the show together, like in my life, it was like everything before I found out about ECW and everything after. And it's like life was just never the same for me as far as from a wrestling perspective. But yeah, I know I texted you to check on you, and I always get worried.
Yeah.
No, of course. But I say that to say because like I always get worried that like I'm the way you find out things sometimes, and I don't want to be. You know what I mean? Like this is just one of those moments that's like, this is your friend. Like this is somebody that you worked with. This is not just a colleague, right? This is someone that's in your life, and
Yeah.
it's just I'm just broken up for you guys, and it's just sad, and I'm
Yeah, the first time I saw Sabu was in the tape trading days. I saw Sabu versus the Lightning Kid, Sean Waltman. It was a show from maybe '92. There was a show in Minnesota that was co-promoted by Dennis Corluzzo and Eddie Sharkey. Eddie Sharkey was notoriously the trainer for the Road Warriors, Rick Rude, and countless others. Sabu wrestled Lightning Kid on that show, and to watch that and to watch his aggressiveness, and not knowing anything about him, just watching the show, and it was amazing, and it became like one of my favorite matches to watch on repeat almost every day. I'd already seen Lightning Kid because we used to get Global Wrestling Federation on ESPN every day. Lightning Kid was the GWF light heavyweight champion. So I was kind of I was used to Jerry Lynn. Sean Waltman, Lightning Kid, but like his feud with Jerry Lynn, they had some classics. And then, just to see Lightning Kid versus Sabu, I was like, oh my God. I love that match so much that like when we're early 2000s, when we're doing 3PW shows in Philly and X-Pac had been released from WWE, I said to Todd Gordon, we got to do this match. It was almost near the anniversary of the first match. I forget what the date was, but Todd made the match happen. He booked X-Pac to come in as Six-Pac, of course.
Yep, of course.
And we had their second ever match on a 3PW show here in Philly at the
That's cool.
Yeah, so just and booking Sabu for those 3PW shows was a way of paying it back because he had booked me on his shows when I was first breaking out, and it means a lot.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking of too is I know that some younger fans may remember his run in WWE, and he had a pretty spectacular match. I think one of my favorite from that era, to be honest, with that low life, dirty, rotten rat bastard John Cena, and he crushed it. And I want to know if you had any context or any stories about that match and how that kind of came to be, or
no, they were in WWE, and I guess they're doing WWE ECW at the time, and I don't know who put the match together, but Sabu, after Sabu has gone on to praise John Cena, and getting a compliment from Sabu is, you have to earn it. He just doesn't throw out compliments. You compliment him on his own match. There's been times where I said Sabu, oh, I really enjoyed that match, and he goes, it was the shits. So he was harder on himself than anything. But for him to compliment somebody, if he's going to be hard on himself, he's going to be harder on other people. And he had nothing but praise for John Cena. And he said, John Cena knows how to work, and the only people who really talk shit on him are people who are jealous of John Cena. John Cena knows how to work, and they had a great match. But that visual, Sabu hitting the ropes, jumping off the chair, jumping, standing there on the top rope, and then diving with the leg drop. Iconic.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
this-
like one of the most iconic visuals of like modern wrestling, I feel like.
yeah, it was. I mean, this was still in the flashbulb era too. You know, where
Yeah.
that to me, I mean, that's the one thing I miss about wrestling back in the day is you knew something was special by the amount of flash bulbs that went off.
Yeah.
You know, when something happens, I mean, go back and look at, Savage Steamboat,
Yeah.
the flash bulbs going off, during that match, or, Randy Savage hitting the elbow on DiBiase to win the world title.
Yeah.
Flash bulbs to go off for that. So Sabu, jumps off the chair, jumps on the top rope, kind of does that thing where he semi loses his balance, regains his balance, and just drops a beauty of a leg drop.
Yeah.
On John Cena. And Cena did the favor, got a little color on that, and a smidge of color, which is
A smidge.
yeah,
A dollop, if you will. Yeah.
an appropriate amount of color. Now, speaking of color, so I'm in ECW, and me and Nova are feuding with the FBI, Tracy Smothers, Little Guido.
What's the matter, you?
What's the matter? And we've been feuding for a while, a good moment, and we were in Buffalo, and I went up to Paul, say, "Hey, Paul, what do you think of next time me and Nova go to wrestle the FBI? As we're getting in the ring, they just jump us, beat the shit out of us. We get a little bit of color, and they carry us out that way." Nobody expects, we're the comedy guys. Nobody expects the comedy guys to get, to bleed, but it would also, add some life and longevity to the feud. And Paul goes, I appreciate, I appreciate you offering to do that for them. So next time we're at the ECW Arena, before the match, I never got color before. Legit color, so I go up to Tommy Rich. I said, "Hey, Tommy, I'm getting color for you tonight. I never made a blade, so come on, Meanie." And it was like, a father giving his son his first beer kind of thing. We sat there, he showed me how to make a blade, and he fucking made me a samurai sword, bro.
Oh man.
I looked at it, I was like, "Oh, thank you." So time comes, get in the ring, FBI jump us, hit us with the flagpoles, hit us with chairs. I go down, they give me the chair shot. I'm supposed to go down to, get the color. And as I'm down there, somebody stomps in the ring. My elbow went, Phoom! Oh no. Oh my God. And I look at the mat, it's like a faucet. I'm like, oh, well, like anything, why waste such good color?
True.
So I go to the ropes, Crimson Mask, they beat the shit out of us. I spill out. Devious Donnie Allen and another buddy carries me out. I get to the curtain, and Sabu's there going, "That's too much blood." And I was like, what? And he goes, "That's too much blood." And I'm looking like thinking he's ribbing, Sabu, right? But then he says, "If you bleed that much on the fourth match, what's the main event going to have to do?" And at that moment, I went, "Oh, you're absolutely right." But even though it was an accident, I didn't intend to get that much color.
Sure.
It was an accident. I took that advice and I said, "I'm sorry, Sabu. It'll never happen again." And went off, got stitched. But that was a lesson, dude. I was so green in ECW, still learning, on the job training, and that was a lesson I learned from Sabu. ridiculous amount of blood. But Sabu, guy with all the scars and barbed wire match, that's too much blood. And I thought it was a rib at first because Sabu would always. He had that dry sense of humor where he'd say something to you, and you would have a delay reaction. And go, oh, that, you know, which a lot of people didn't get to see his humor, but I thought he was ribbing me. So, yeah, that was just another lesson, with Sabu.
I got to know, because I'm trying to find it as we're talking. Did Sabu and New Jack ever have any one-on-one matches in ECW?
I don't think so.
Can somebody fact check? Because I'm looking up right now and I see a Rob Van Dam Sabu versus New Jack and Little Spike Dudley, because that's the appropriate way to say it. And I can't find a single one out there, so I would be curious to know.
In 3PW, we had a three-way match where it was Sabu, New Jack, and Sandman in a three-way body bag match.
Oh man,
yeah.
Whew. What was the dynamic like between those guys? I can't like. I'm
Fine.
sure. Yeah.
Everybody got along great.
It's amazing.
Yeah. When it comes to Sandman, when it comes to New Jack, and when it comes to Sabu, is all about the approach.
I see.
How you approach them, it's like that scene in the movie Airplane. Excuse me, I speak Sabu. Excuse me, I speak New Jack.
Mm-hmm.
You approach them with respect. They approach you with respect. I've seen somebody go up and say something to Sandman, and they approach them the wrong way. I'd see them tune them right the fuck out. They're just like walk away. And in some ways rightfully so.
Yeah.
But I've never seen a one-on-one Sabu New Jack.
Mass Sanity says I can find info about New Jack, Sabu, and Sandman from TNA in 2003, but nothing one-on-one. I'll have to go back and take a look at that. That's
yeah, I'm not saying it didn't happen. I just said I
right.
never saw it. Yeah.
Right, never saw it. Well, we want to thank you guys for being here with us tonight and sharing your thoughts. And
lively chat here.
Yeah, we got a lot of good stuff here. Mass Sanity also says Sabu and Big Show at SummerSlam. That happened.
Yeah.
I want to go back and watch it, actually. So, like I said, my oldest is starting to get very inquisitive about the ECW years. This is also the same kid that won't watch Pirates of the Caribbean, but is trying to convince me that he's okay to watch Clown in a Cornfield. And I'm like, brother, that's not how this works, man.
Right.
So he's like asking me, we're always talking about you and, the things that you did in your career and stuff. And he was like, what was ECW really like? And I'm like, well, I can't show you any of that stuff just yet because I got to go back and watch it all. But dude,
it's amazing. It's amazing what I was raised on and I was allowed to watch as a kid. In the
right.
I was so unsupervised.
Dude, we were latchkey kids. We had the keys on our neck, and my parents were like, whatever, just survive until we get home at 9:30. That's it.
I saw a t-shirt that popped me. It says, Generation X, raised on hose water and neglect.
You could do that for the geriatric millennials too, man. We were
sitting
God
home,
almighty.
Sitting home in my bedroom on a Saturday night, and Prism went over to the dirty movies. Watching Cinderella.
You pause it at titties on TV. You're like, yep. I'm telling you, man. There was actually more supervision for us at my grandparents' house in Delco than there was actually at my parents' house. And somehow we were still able to manage watching ECW because they had the TV in the basement. And, they had the coax and everything down there. So you'd be able to twist and turn and do all that shit. And then boom, you'd get ECW. But God, dude, I don't know how my mind is not more warped than it should be after all the things I watched as a kid that I shouldn't have.
Yeah. But Sabu was such a tough guy, man.
Yeah.
Everybody remembers the time in ECW when he wrestled Benoit and Benoit broke his neck.
Oh, right.
Accidentally, because they were trying to do a spot where Benoit was going to throw Sabu up, and Sabu was supposed to take like a backdrop bump, and something got screwy, and Sabu came down on his neck, and he rolled out, and they had to discontinue the match. Now, here's a story I don't think a lot of people know, but when Sabu was a teenager, he was at a party. This part was brought up on Dark Side of the Ring. The ending of this story, a lot of people don't know. But Sabu was at a party as a teenager, and some guys brought some guns, and a fight broke out, and somebody shot his friend in the stomach, and Sabu, rushed the guy who shot his friend. And the guy shot Sabu right in the face, like put the gun right up to him, shot him right in the face, shattered some of his teeth. And to this day, Sabu lived the rest of his life with bullet fragments in his face. So the Chris Benoit accident happens. Up, down on the neck. They take him to the hospital. They have him going for X-rays. The doctor takes the X-ray, puts it out in the light board, and goes, man. He's like pointing, and he's pointing to like the bullet fragments, and he's just baffled by it. He's like, you have bullet fragments in your face? Sabu looks at him and goes, yeah, I was there when it happened. Yeah, I was there when it happened.
That's amazing.
So now when like I'm ever in a situation when somebody's doing the Chris Farley.
Yep.
Remember that time?
Do you remember when?
Yeah, I go, I was there when it happened.
I'm gonna work.
Say that out in the wild. That's a Sabuism.
I know where that came from. Yeah, one of my favorite things that I saw with you guys, and you'll have to correct me on the year.
Sure.
But I believe he was there. So I think I saw him. It was the year at the Icons of Wrestling when a bunch of you guys were all there. It was Sandman. I think Sabu was there. Was Bubba there as well? Just watching all you guys interact with each other was fun. You know what I mean? It's just it's like I said, like you talk about all the time. It's like a reunion when you guys see each other. Yep. And I hadn't experienced that yet for you guys or being around it, and just watching all of you kind of like just laughing and enjoying each other's company. I just thought that was really special. And I was glad I got to witness, and I watched all you guys, like you took the big picture together and all like that. And
yeah, there's a big group photo of us all together.
Yeah. Was that 2022 or was that 2023? I can't remember which year it was.
I can look that up.
Yeah.
I might have been Meanie Claus that day.
Yes, that's the same day. Yep.
It was me and Mrs. Meanie were take a photo with a friend, and Sabu like slid in and photo bombed the photo. And it's the cutest damn thing, Yeah. As cute as a homicidal, suicidal, genocidal maniac could be. Yep. Who's adorable. But yeah, Sabu, man.
It's a shame.
Yeah, just those shows are. That's why I like doing. That's why I prefer conventions over wrestling shows anymore. You can be around the boys and not be, because I get bad anxiety, on shows, and I'd rather just talk to the boys and hang out with the guys. And that day doing those conventions, and dude, I saw Sabu 2 weeks ago, not this past Saturday, but Saturday before that, and he had just had his big match. And his last match. Now this Sabu went. We saw him Saturday, and then he went on to record a podcast with. There's a podcast called Legion of Skanks with Big J Okerson and his co-hosts, who are all huge wrestling fans. And little did they know this would be Sabu's last interview ever. And during the course of the interview, they kept saying, Sabu, you just had your retirement match. And Sabu keeps correcting him. He's like, no, I had my last match. Because that was my last match. Technically, that was his last match. I think Sabu felt like he still had another match in him. So, and I don't know where I was going with that story, but the wrestling business was in his blood. It was it was it was in his DNA, not only because his uncle did it, but it's what he loved to do. And he was a fun guy. He was an honorable man. He was a giving man. He gave more to the wrestling business than he ever got back.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of people out there. I said this earlier in the week. I was with the Podfather Conrad, and I kind of cut myself off, but I have to say I am just one man. And what I meant to say is I am just one man of many people who Sabu took under his wing, and taught him, and taught people he taught and learned lessons from. Super tough guy. Me and Al would be on the road somewhere. Like early on in my training, Al would go to a booking and I would ride along, and I learned more in the car rides than I, training. You could train anybody to do wrestling moves and stuff like that, but like talking about the business and learning about the business, you learn more in the car rides,
Yeah.
And we would sit there and go, how much pain do you think Sabu is on a regular basis? And it turned into this thing of like, here's Sabu answering the phone. Hello. Ow. Sabu sitting in a lounge chair. A cat jumps on his lap. Ow. Here's Sabu sipping water. Ow. Just the guy had to be in constant pain, So, like I said, physically, he sacrificed so much. He came to one of Al's gym shows with both hands bandaged up, and it's like, what happened? He's like, oh, I went to do a spot. I overshot the table, broke both my hands.
Oh, God.
But he still had to work. So he got this like, almost like turnbuckle padding, and his hands looked like two makeshift boxing gloves because he just had to protect his hands, and it didn't matter where he wrestled, who he wrestled. He went out there and gave it 100% every time. You go to you never know where you're going to show up when you go to a booking. I've had people go, oh, we're sold out, and you should go up and there's 20 people in the crowd, just. I had one promoter say, we tried this new booking strategy. We advertised that the show was sold out, hoping that we could sell more tickets. I went, oh, that's great. Can I get my pay before my match?
Seriously, yeah, I want to get paid right now. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, yeah. But Sabu would give you the full Sabu experience, whether it was one person or 10,000, 20,000, whatever. So, and that's why this has just been this worst week. This is right up there with, losing a family member. Our wrestling fraternity is, no matter what we do in the business, right? Whether we get along, don't get along, whether we squash our beats or not, we're all in this together, and we're all trusting each other with each other's bodies and well-being in the hopes of making a better living for ourselves and hopefully for our families. Not everybody gets to, make the big bucks, but, if you're a good worker and trustworthy and reliable, you'll always make money in the business in one shape or another. And Sabu, was always somebody you knew it when you put his name on a poster, he was going to sell tickets.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, it's a shame. The biggest shame, of his career is by the time he started getting notoriety, he was, people were thinking he was ripping off things he created because people would see him do it in ECW and go do it on a bigger scale.
Yeah.
So he looked like he was copying the stuff he came up with. I was me and Goldust were wrestling the Hardys on Sunday Night Heat, the night, of Over the Edge. And the Hardys they're trying to describe this high spot to me. I went, fellas, I I did this spot with Sabu, so I'm good. Just, it's just like, I was being polite about it, but I was like, yeah, I've done this with Sabu. And they're like, oh, okay, which is cool. But yeah, I'm sitting here just new stories come to my mind every day, new memories. And I'm fortunate I have this platform here to talk to you and talk with the fans. And my job now, like I do with a lot of the people who've helped me, is help carry their torch forward, carry their name forward. So, maybe hopefully if I get to the age of like 80, 85, people are like, oh, look at this wrestler. I'll be like, oh, that wrestler, you should have seen Sabu. There's a few wrestlers who, who I owe a lot to. Of course, I owe a lot to Al Snow. I owe a lot to Sabu. I owe a lot to Tracy Smothers, and the ECW locker room, accepted me and helped build me up. I owe a lot to my BWO brothers, But it's been a rough week.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your stories tonight with us and with the fans as well. We appreciate you talking and just being here. And
I'm sure as soon as we log off, I'll think of like 20 other stories. But
listen, we can talk about it more again next week too. We can talk about Sabu as much as you want, because I will forever be a Sabu fan, and it's on us to keep that tradition and that legacy going for him, and keep his name, in the conversation of the greats in wrestling, because that's what he was. So we want to thank you all for being here as well. Normally this is the part of the show where we would do our Ask Meanie segment, but we're going to save that for next week. We'll come back and we'll do our usual same bat time, same bat channel.
Yeah, this is all about Sabu tonight.
Yeah.
Make it about Sabu, and that's all that matters.
Yep, absolutely. We want to thank you guys for being here tonight. We want to thank you for joining us again each and every week. Don't forget to subscribe at Brass Ring Media at their YouTube page. You can check in with us each week as we go live. So for the Blue Meanie, I am Adam Barnard. Join us again each and every week as they take a trip through the mind of the Meanie.
Blue World Order.
This episode of Mind of the Meanie is hosted and executively produced by the Blue Meanie and Adam Barnard. It was mixed and engineered by Carl Pinnell. Additional narration is provided by the executive voice, Sam Krebs. That's me. Our intro music was performed by the Swamp Candles. Our outro music was performed by Chikara. Additional musical accompaniment is performed by Enrichment. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter, or X or whatever, at Mind of the Meanie, and become part of the Pod Squad by going to patreon.com/Mind of the Meanie. Find our entire show archive at mindofthemeanie.com. This has been a Butts Carlton media production. Butts Carlton, proprietor.
Blue World Order.
That was Blue Meanie's brain out.